Hi everyone, this is my case study, Missing Booster Club Funds, and my name is Jessica McGrail. So we're going to begin with a brief summary. So the school that we're going to be talking about is George Washington Middle School, and their population is going to be moving from more of a city public school to more of the population is moving to the suburbs. So that means that what is left behind is the lower socioeconomic status residents. There happens to be some positives that are left from that, though, that they have a lot of parent volunteers that are really supporting the community at the school. There's one principal, his name is Mr. Stevens, and it seems to be that he is stretched very thin with his responsibilities because he is the only administrator at the building. And the problem that we're having at our current situation is that there's a missing $50 bill as well as the cost of 10 tickets are missing. And this is the last basketball game of the year. We'll get into more details. Next slide. So problem identification analysis. So what I know is Mrs. Bowman is a parent volunteer and that her daughter is a 7th grader at George Washington Middle School. And that Mrs. Bowman recently came into Mr. Stevens' office and asked for her student, that her student is doing an all-state cheerleading competition parade, and that she would like the PTA to help sponsor to send her daughter, and it would cost about $798, and that she was hoping that the PTA would provide that money. Mr. Stevens said we cannot do that because that money is meant for all students, not just one. And that made Mrs. Bowman a little frustrated because she would like the school to support them. And then what happened at the next game, Mrs. Bowman was working as a parent volunteer at the ticket stand collecting money, and that there were pre-numbered tickets used, and that she reported that 10 tickets were torn. But Mr. Stevens also had a discussion with another parent that had just gotten paid recently and had used a $50 bill to use to enter the basketball game. And then at the end of the night, the $50 bill was not in the deposit. So what I need to know is, was there any other parent volunteers or parents in general that saw the tickets being torn? So if any parents were in line, did they see that they got torn somehow? And then, did anyone see Mrs. Bowman trade out the $50 bill to another parent? Some parents, she might have asked another parent to break the $50 bill, and that's why it's missing. Was there another adult present when Mrs. Bowman was completing the ticket account sheet? And did anyone else have access to the ticket money throughout the night? So did anyone other than Mrs. Bowman have any access to that money throughout the night? Also, we need to know if there's any security footage that we could double check stories. And then we also need to know what the policy is for the Booster Club. So what's the problem? Well, there is little oversight of the parent volunteers due to Mr. Stevens being stretched incredibly thin. And there is not an expectation, at least that there wasn't stated, of how the individuals need to handle money in the accounting ticket at the end of the night. There should also be a process of documentation involved when tickets are torn, because that can increase a safeguard in place and prevent some of the confusion that may have or had not happened. So plan of action. Step 1, I would say before leaving, Mr. Stevens should create a list of documentation. So that should include him doing a complete write-up of the events of that night. So he should include an image of what was given to him at the end of the night, and that should also be written up by the security guard that was with him. They should both have a write-up and documentation and pictures of what was seen so that they have two stories that go together. Mr. Stevens should also write up his interaction with Mr. Dumas, who was the one that spent the $50 bill at the ticket gate. We would also like a signed write-up from Mr. Dumas of saying that he did use the $50 bill and his conversation with Mr. Stevens. We would also like to have a write-up from Mr. Stevens about the conversation that happened with Mrs. Bowman the day prior about PTA sponsoring her daughter. So my plan of action of step 2 would be Mr. Stevens should go interview all the parent volunteers of that basketball game that night. There might be someone that can identify that they were working for parts of the time or all the time with Mrs. Bowman. They can answer questions about tickets torn that night possibly. They could also add any other information that could be informative of the reason of why there's a missing money. He should check the security cameras in the area and contact district accounting office. So step 3 would be have a conversation with Mrs. Bowman about the results of the investigation. This should not be accusatory. It should, but it should have a member of the PTA Booster Club or HR present. We would like for Mrs. Bowman to explain her side of things, what happened. We might have a confusion piece, but at least even if it's confusion piece, we have documentation. Then we would like to discuss with her the current problem that's happening and why we are concerned about missing funds and torn tickets. And then step 4, depending on the results from that conversation and his investigation, Mr. Stevens should move forward with a plan. So he should identify the person who took the money, if he can, and then follow the Board of Education guidelines of how we respond to that. If he does not identify the person who took the money, we should create and restructure the way parent volunteers deal with money, and we should have processes and procedures in place that are going to prevent and help put in some safeguards to handle misuse of funds and possible theft. So my decision based on what is best for students. So I want to continue to allow parents and volunteers to come into our schools. We want to continue that community relationship. However, we need to provide training to them to make sure that this does not happen again. It's important that we protect student funds because the funds are there to support our students and allow them access to activities and resources. Lastly, we want to create an accountability process. That way that all of our parents and students know that we have high expectations and that everyone is held accountable no matter who you are within our school. And even if there's no proof that Mrs. Bowman has taken the money, but it shows that there's a need for a process to be in place and accountability. So either way, from our findings, we need to have this in place. My thoughts, feelings, and values related to this problem. So my thoughts are that this is primarily the responsibility of the principal. He trusted too much in parents being having a good feeling that they would do the right thing, and that it backfired. So my thoughts are is that the principal, this is really on him, even if there was someone that did something wrong. But however, I feel that the principal has a lot on his plate. He's stretched super thin, so he has to rely on others to help him build the community and make sure that everything's still following through and happening. I value that the school has created great relationships with the parents and that they have created an environment that supports its students, because that is invaluable, and without that, I don't know if that they would be able to have some of the things that they have going on. Unresolved issues. So where's that missing $50 bill? And in this short story did not tell us, but that's something that's still missing. Again, how do we build trust again with the parent volunteers from the school to parents, and even within the parents, how do they build that trust back up? How do we change our processes and procedures of handling money? There's obviously shown a need that we need it to happen. So how do we change that? And then this loss of money, how does that impact our students? So this is about Standard 8. An educational leader promotes the academic success and personal well-being of every student by ensuring effective and efficient management of the school district to promote student social and academic learning. So component 1, as an educational leader, I would promote effective and efficient management of the school or district by I would definitely be present at all the events that I can be, to making sure that it's important that I'm there and showing that I care about them, but also checking in with the people that are handling that money that night, knowing that there is an expectation and making sure that they are aware of it. It'll be important if we complete internal audits to increase our safeguards, because obviously we are lacking in those in this situation. I would also create infographics to explain the policies and procedures from the handbook and guideline to make sure that if they forget a step, it's easy to go and reflect on the infographic to get that information. As an educational leader, I promote the social learning of every student by building student and parent rapport, acknowledging and reinforcing student achievement. So not only do I want to make sure that we have a community support, but making sure that I'm acknowledging that their success is happening and attending events to showing them that I care. But I also want to make sure that the funds are secure, that our students actually have events that they can go and be successful at. As an educational leader, I promote student academic learning by continuing to have a collaborative relationship with parents, because a lot of our student success relies on that parent support and input. I'd also ensure that funds aren't spent on all students, but that they are spent on all students and not just one individual. Those funds are there for everyone so that they can access activities and resources, and I want to make sure that it's spent on everyone and not just one. I also think that it'd be important for our students to become volunteers to learn about this process of accounting. I think that it might spike an interest with some of our students as a future career, but also to show that there is these processes and procedures in place within our community. And that's my case study. Thanks for listening. I've really enjoyed this class. Thank you.